Shut your eyes for a second and picture this. Not one wife sitting by the door waiting for her husband, but four. Not one dinner table full of conversation, but four tables spread out in various homes, each one ringing with the laughter of children, bickering, and never-ending questions. Visualize one man at the center of everything, darting from house to house, from wife to wife, from child to child, attempting to be all things to all people. That man is Kody Brown. The world first learned his name in 2010, when TLC introduced a program that would incite curiosity, judgment, and endless discussion. Sister Wives viewers had witnessed reality television featuring housewives, families, celebrities. But this was not the same. This was a man who stood and proudly stated that his life, his time, his heart belonged not to one but to four. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't secretive. He let the cameras into his house and said, "Here we are. This is our life." From the first episode, everyone was stuck to their screens. Some were appalled, murmuring that it was unnatural. Others were intrigued, leaning forward, wondering how such a life was even conceivable. But whatever they thought of him, one thing was for sure. No one could turn their head. At the heart of this remarkable tale were his wives. Meri, the initial wife, had been with Kody since the start. Strong, committed, and tending to wear a reserved sorrow in her eyes. As if she had given more than she had received, she was a steady presence. Next was Janelle, serene, rational, and practical. Not the most emotional or romantic, but she anchored the family like a rock in turbulent waters. Warmth and laughter came with the third wife, Christine. She was the caregiver, the one who lit up spaces with her sense of humor and held the children close in her arms and in her heart. And last but not least, Robyn, youngest, newest, the one Kody appeared to fall in love with a ferocity so apparent it made the other wives uncomfortable. And picture their homes, big, active, always vibrant. Kids' shoes by the door, backpacks tossed in the hallways, dinners cooking in four kitchens, birthdays, Christmas mornings, family trips, all times four. There were flashes of sheer bliss, kids shrieking in delight as they opened gifts, wives gathered around laughing together at inside humor, Kody barreling in with his booming laugh, wrapping an arm around whoever was closest. But there were shadows in the margins as well. Tears silently wiped away when no one noticed. Hearts pining for more time, more attention, more love. Kody, with his expansive smile and agitated energy, appeared to thrive in the disorder. He ran from one wife's door to the next, like a man on a mission, assuring each one of them that they counted, that they were loved, that he could fit it all in. He frequently told them love was not finite, that it grew without end, that sharing it didn't mean less for anyone, it meant more for everyone, and he thought so. With his words, he created a picture of a grand experiment, a life based on faith, allness, and unity. Love, however, is not an equation, and human hearts are not so easily calculated. No matter how hard the wives worked, jealousy made its way into their lives like a most unwelcome guest. Meri sat silently as Kody laughed with another wife, her eyes weighed down with unasked questions. Christine's smile would sometimes slip when she felt ignored. Janelle would withdraw, hiding beneath a veil of pragmatism. And Robyn, without ever seeking it, became the focal point for tension. Her relationship with Kody impossible to miss. Nevertheless, the family persevered. The cameras saw it all. Birthday parties where all the kids sang along together, road trips that became crazy adventures, and long deep conversations about their faith and challenges. It was more than a polygamy show. It was love, faith, family, and the all-too-human need to belong. Audiences didn't watch. They identified. They recognized bits of themselves in the laughter, fights, tears, in living rooms throughout America and the world. People argued, was Kody visionary, openly living his truth in spite of what others said? Or was he selfish, spreading himself too thin, leaving shattered hearts behind? Was plural marriage really all about love? Or was it a formula for jealousy and heartache? But for a time, at least, Kody managed. He thought he could be equal, that his wives would be equally loved, that his children would grow strong in the care of a giant family. There were times when it seemed to work, when the wives smiled together, when the children played freely, when Kody's voice rang out filled with hope and faith. But if you looked closely enough, you could see the tension. Late at night, when cameras were turned off, when the children slept, when laughter dissolved into silence, those were the times when the second-guessing grew loud. Could one man truly divide his heart into 4 equal quarters? Could love really stretch without breaking? The tale of Kody Brown, during those early years, was not simply one of a man who had 4 wives. It was one of the vulnerability of human relationship, of how easily love can turn to isolation, of how vows intended to be mutual sometimes prove broken. It was of a vision that seemed beautiful in outward appearance, but had fissures hidden deep within. And yet, even through those cracks, the world stood and watched in awe. Because in Kody Brown, folks recognized something both remarkable and achingly familiar. They recognized a man who was attempting to give everything, and women who were attempting to cling to what they had. They recognized children growing up amidst it all, innocent and optimistic. They recognized a family that was both special and universal, both distinct and at the same time somehow just like everybody else's. Kody Brown was more than the man with 4 wives. He was the man who opened a door to a secret world, and brought the world a glimpse of what it's like to live a life, tugged in opposite directions, by love, faith, and unattainable expectations. He was the man who for a season convinced millions that perhaps, just perhaps, such a life was possible. But simmering beneath the surface, tempests were already brewing. The 4 wives man was poised to confront challenges that would push not only his marriages, but the core of the life he had created. When Kody Brown talked about his existence, he had never referred to it as weird or complicated. To him, existence was straightforward. He felt he believed in a vision, a dream of a family established not on 2 individuals but on numerous people. Plural marriage in his mind was not simply marrying many wives. It was creating a kingdom of love, support, and faith. He desired his home to be greater than a house. He desired it to be a community. And for a little while he really did believe that he had accomplished it. He would explain repeatedly that he believed in plural marriage from his religion, a profound faith that families would become more cohesive and stronger if they increased in love instead of splitting. To the outside world it seemed impossible, almost dangerous. But to Kody, it was like constructing a city on numerous foundations, a building so broad and solid that it could never collapse. He envisioned himself the center post, keeping everything in position, ensuring every wife and every child was protected under one roof of faith and devotion. Those early years, the Brown family had something magical about them. They referred to it as living the principle, a principle of sharing, of unity, of sacrifice. They reassured themselves that jealousy would pass with time, that love would grow stronger as it was shared with more people. Kody grinned confidently when he said love wasn't like a pie, running out when you share it, but more like a flame that burns brighter when you light another candle. And his wives, in their respective ways, attempted to believe it too. Meri, being the first wife, had previously envisioned herself as the sole one. She married Kody under the assumption that she was going to be exclusive. But when the plural marriage concept arrived, she consented to opening her heart. It wasn't convenient, but she reminded herself that love is sacrifice. She wanted Kody to pursue his calling, so she became the foundation of the family dream. Janelle arrived next, distinct from Meri, more independent, less emotional yet very practical. To her, plural marriage was about stability and cooperation. She thought it could work because she did not need Kody's undivided attention. She was at peace with the larger picture. Christine, the third wife, arrived with her big smile and effervescent laugh. She adored children, she adored the community, and she was a believer in the dream, wholeheartedly. For Christine, plural marriage wasn't about Kody, although that was part of it. It was about sisterhood, about women holding each other as they raised their children together. And then there was Robyn, the youngest, who came along later, infusing things with new energy, a new flame of romance that reignited something in Kody's eyes. Seeing them together at first was to see something special. Holidays were like festivals. Picture Thanksgiving in the Brown family, 4 kitchens hum in unison, the aroma of pies and turkey wafting through the air, kids dashing from house to house with sticky hands, and wives laughing in groups, swapping tales as they prepared the meal. During Christmas, presents stacked up high like little mountains, and Kody darted from one living room to the next, his booming voice filled with enthusiasm. his laughter bursting over as he observed his children unwrap their wishes. There were family councils where they all sat together, rows of children listening, wives leaning forward, and Kody sitting in the middle like the commander of a miniature army. They scheduled meals, budgets, schedules, and birthdays. Everything took time, for nothing in a family with 4 wives and over a dozen children was ever easy. But for all the chaos, there was a sort of harmony in it, a rhythm that only they could know. To everyone else, the Brown family seemed like they were from another planet. Cameras caught glimpses of utter bliss, sisters-in-laws supporting each other with new babies, kids crawling on couches for nights in, Kody dancing turns with his wives at family gatherings. It was not difficult to understand why some fans envied them. They weren't merely getting by, they were living a fantasy that seemed out of reach to everyone else. Even in the midst of those happy times, however, there were shadows that never left. The wives would occasionally acknowledge the difficulties. Meri revealed that at times she would wake up in the middle of the night, wondering where Kody was, wishing he were with her. Janelle acknowledged that although she did not require constant romance, she sometimes felt as though she were sitting on the sidelines of a game she didn't comprehend. Christine's smile would sometimes fail, a flash of wistfulness crossing her face when she felt neglected. And Robyn, never asking for it, bore the burden of being perceived as the favorite of Kody. Yet the fantasy sustained them. They thought that they were part of something greater than themselves, something divine, something everlasting. Kody, in his mind, thought he was constructing not only a family but a legacy. He used to talk all the time about how plural children had more love, more support, more siblings to rely on. And in a lot of ways he was correct. His children were raised surrounded by a pool so big that it was impossible to number. They had dozens of brothers and sisters, countless cousins, and several mother figures who loved them dearly. To a child, the Brown family might seem like the most secure village in the world. But the larger the dream, the more unbearable the burden. The math of plural marriage was tiring. Kody attempted to split his time down the middle, planning nights with each wife, switching back and forth between houses, not favoring one over another. Hearts don't work according to calendars. A wife would feel isolated even if it was her turn. A child would miss his daddy when he was on the other side of town. And Kody himself was starting to feel the toll. His face weary, his words occasionally cutting, his body tugged in too many directions all at once. However, during those times, the family moved on. They laughed in front of the cameras. They smiled at the dinner table. They told the world why their way of life was important. They wanted the world to notice the love, not merely the envy. They wanted to show everyone that their faith would be stronger than any doubt, that their dream would endure anything. And it looked like it could happen, for a time. Fans watched year after year, some rooting them on, some awaiting their downfall, but all enthralled. For underneath the unconventional organization of their family was something that was universal: the quest for love, for belonging, for purpose. The plural marriage ideal was lovely in its own right. It was full of laughter, children's laughter, women who supported each other like sisters, a husband who thought he could love many without breaking his heart. It was delicate and messy, yes, but it was also courageous. And in those early years before the storm clouds gathered, it was a dream that shone brightly, an extraordinary experiment in love and family that the entire world watched. At first glance, the Browns were unstoppable. Their lives were loud, colorful, and ceaselessly full of tales that entertained millions. But hidden from the din of children's giggles and the gossip of 4 wives navigating daily madness, something heavier, quieter, and much more sinister was growing. The cracks had already appeared, though the world did not see it at first. It began with small things, moments so minute, they almost went unnoticed. Meri would perch at the end of the couch, her smile weak, her eyes glancing at Kody as he engaged in conversation with someone else with more enthusiasm, more attention. Christine, the normally cheerful one, would sometimes withdraw into the kitchen, slamming pots and pans noisily greater than needed, her laughter a touch too overdone. Janelle, her calm and pragmatic self, buried herself in work and shunned contention, but her withdrawal was louder than words. And then there was Robyn, the newest bride, the one who had ignited a spark of newness in Kody's life. Her arrival altered the dynamic in ways that no one could possibly anticipate. To the outside world, the family maintained that plural marriage was all about love, trust, and oneness. They informed the cameras that jealousy was inevitable, but could be conquered. They grinned during interviews, describing sisterhood to make them stronger, that their children were raising their offspring in a setting abundant in love. And for many viewers, that was explanation enough. But within those residences, feelings seethed like pots allowed to boil too long on the stovetop. Meri, the initial wife, suffered the most. She had been present from day one, the cornerstone upon which the family was constructed. But each time a new wife entered the picture, she felt her position diminishing. She attempted to smile it away, to persuade herself that love was infinite, that Kody still regarded her as special. But the reality nagged at her. She saw his eyes light up when he entered Robyn's house, a spark that she hadn't seen pointed toward her in years. She confessed in quiet, tearful moments that she was alone, that her marriage had faded away without her even knowing when. Christine, the lifelong dreamer of a big, happy plural family, found herself struggling with disappointment. She had dreamed of this lifestyle her entire life, hoping it would be joyful, sisterly, and fulfilling. But in reality, it left her feeling overlooked. She wanted Kody's attention, his assurance, his affection, but she felt like she was running a race she could never win. Her lively personality, once her armor, couldn't conceal the fissures growing within her heart. Janelle was different. She wasn't as emotionally demonstrative as the others, and she tended to be more focused on autonomy. But even she started to feel the strain. She was pragmatic, yes, but she was also human. She picked up on the favoritism, the subtle changes in Kody's demeanor, how he would sometimes be more at home in one of the homes than in the others. Her answer was to pull away, to prioritize her children, her job, her autonomy. But that distance was itself a fissure in the foundation. And then Robyn. She didn't ask to be Kody's favorite, but her connection to him was clear. It was written in the way he gazed at her, in the gentle tone of his voice when he talked to her, in the additional time he appeared to stay at her home. To the other wives, it was salt on old wounds. They worked to be kind, to accept her, to treat her like a sister. But at midnight, when they lay awake and were alone with their thoughts, the jealousy whispered, "Why her? Why not me?" The cracks grew wider in large decisions. Where to reside, how to handle finances, how to split up holidays, every conversation became a battlefield of underlying feelings. Kody, once the high-energy leader juggling it all, began to get frustrated. He tried to maintain control, to reassure everyone he could still keep the impossible balanced. But even he could sense the walls closing in. His tone became more razor-sharp, his temper shorter. The man once talking of love as an infinite flame now found himself drained, exhausted from constantly juggling. The kids also started to notice. They cared deeply for their father, but they noticed how frequently he was away, how hastily he darted out the door to another residence. Some of them felt the pain of being left behind, even though they couldn't articulate it. For them, the cracks were in the missed night stories, in the vacant seats at school gatherings, in the guarantees that sometimes weren't kept. The show's cameras caught glimpses of these struggles, a tear sliding down Meri's cheek as she spoke about loneliness. Christine admitting that she didn't always feel like Kody cared. Janelle calmly saying she needed space, her voice steady but distant. And Robyn, crying as she insisted she never wanted to cause pain, that she only wanted love and peace. But the reality was inescapable. What appeared to be unity was beginning slowly to disintegrate. The dream that had appeared so powerful, so invincible, was now starting to crumble under the pressure of facts. Love would expand, yes, but so would jealousy, and once it establishes itself, it germinates stealthily, secretly, until one day it erupts into the light like an inescapable storm. For the Browns, the storm was at hand. The small cracks, silent nights, jealous stares, quiet fights, were merely the start. What had begun as whispers in the dark would become shouts in broad daylight. The man who was convinced that he could be all to all would soon discover that even the firmest dreams will shatter when stretched too tight. The day Christine decided to walk away was not unexpected. It wasn't one argument, one tear, or one sleepless night that shattered her. It was years in the process, small cuts stacked atop each other, until the burden of them crushed what she had always assumed. Christine was always the optimist, the cheerful one, the wife who attempted to smile even when it was difficult. She had fantasized about plural marriage her entire life. To her, it was something that should be a blessing, something through which she could create a community where no woman was ever lonely, where children were raised by a whole village of mothers, and where love was multiplied rather than divided. But the fantasy that she held in her heart never quite equaled the reality that she experienced. For years she reassured herself that loneliness was the norm, that jealousy would subside, that Kody loved her despite not always expressing it. She smiled when there was disappointment, laughed when tears came closest, and promised herself that patience would deliver to her the marriage she yearned for. But beneath, her heart cried. It was not with yelling, but with silence that the breaking point came. Kody was distant, his tone sharper, his presence spotty. The father of her children, the man she had once looked up to, didn't look at her with affection anymore. She was invisible, a ghost in her own house. And when she demanded love, time, intimacy, his responses were deeper cuts than silence could ever inflict. One interview went like a knife through her mind. She had informed Kody that she didn't feel like a wife anymore, that she needed more from him: respect, partnership, affection. And he, drained and angry, told her coldly that he wasn't attracted to her anymore. The words blew something apart within her. She had given her youth, her commitment, her existence to this marriage, and now she was informed she wasn't desirable anymore. It was in that instant that Christine knew she couldn't go on like this. She couldn't continue to smile for the cameras, the children, the world when her heart shattered in secret. She was worth better. Better than scraps of affection, better than apologies, better than being treated like baggage. So she did something about it. It wasn't easy to leave. There were kids to consider, habits to break, and years of history to sort through. She walked through the rooms of her home, running her fingers across the walls, recalling birthday celebrations, holiday dinners, and peaceful evenings reading children's stories to her offspring. She wasn't merely leaving a husband. She was leaving a whole existence behind. But Christine had gotten to the place where remaining hurt more than departing. She started packing slowly, silently, folding clothes with calm hands, packing belongings with tears blurring her vision. Each thing she packed in a box was a goodbye, not only to her house, but to the dream she'd once believed in so completely. When the time finally arrived to break the news to the family, it was as if a storm had burst. The other wives were shocked, although some knew more than they would ever confess. Meri had known the pangs of being forgotten. Janelle, practical and unflappable, had witnessed the cracks for years. And Robyn, in the middle of it all, cried openly, refusing to let Christine leave. Kody's response was explosive. The assured man who once declared his family untouchable now stormed against the truth. He angrily blamed Christine for betrayal, for leaving their faith, for destroying the family they had created. His language was cutting, full of anger and pain. But behind that anger there was fear. The fear of losing control, of losing what he had created, of being left behind. Christine did not meet his anger. She did not scream, did not fight. She answered softly, her tone firm, her determination unshakable. She said she had had enough of living a life where she was not appreciated. She said she was leaving not only for herself, but for her children, for them to see their mother happy, respected and complete. And then she walked away. The cameras trailed behind, as Christine loaded the final remnants of her belongings into a moving van. Her children flanked her, some sobbing, some unwept, all of them aware that their lives were irrevocably altered. She embraced the women who had been sisters to her for decades, embracing them hard, speaking low endearments and goodbyes. And then she entered her new existence, leaving the man she'd once centered her universe around. For viewers, it was a moment of shock. Christine had always been one of the greatest proponents of plural marriage, the wife who stood by it, who smiled and hurt, who struggled to make it work even when it didn't. To watch her walk away was to witness the dream itself disintegrate. If Christine couldn't remain, if Christine couldn't make it work, then perhaps the dream wasn't what it appeared to be. Kody was shaken, his world falling apart, piece by piece. The family that had been a symbol of togetherness was breaking down in front of everyone. Christine's leaving wasn't merely one wife walking out. It was the first domino, the start of the end for the life he had vowed to keep together. And yet for Christine, it was just the start of something. For the first time in years, she was free. She got a house of her own, opened a new chapter with her kids, and uncovered the pieces of herself that she had put away for so long out of sacrifice. Her smile, once phony, was real again. Her laugh returned, lighter, freer, unfettered. The woman who had once thought she had only one purpose, to share a husband, had discovered her own strength, her own value. She no longer required Kody's validation. She had left the pain behind, and in leaving it she discovered herself. Christine's decision altered everything. For the Browns, it was the first clear indication that the family was not invincible. For viewers, it was confirmation that love, however deep, cannot endure without respect. And for Christine herself, it was the beginning of a life she had always deserved, but had been too scared to grasp. The dream of having multiple spouses had promised her bliss, but ultimately delivered heartache, and thus she opted for a new dream, a one founded not on sharing, but on freedom, respect, and the potential of an all-her-own love. Janelle was never the loudest personality in the room. She wasn't the one who cried on camera, or the one who wore her heart on her sleeve. Right from the start, she had built her position within the family upon calmness, stability, and practicality. As the other wives struggled with emotions, Janelle struggled with solutions. When finances were low, she budgeted. When there was disagreement, she kept quiet, preferring silence to argument. To the world outside, she seemed to be the stable pillar on which everyone leaned. But pillars do crumble when too much pressure is put on them. For years, Janelle assured herself she could manage the imbalance. She could manage Kody's mercurial attention, his lengthy absences, his quick temper. She assured herself that she didn't require grand overtures of love, that independence was her strength. She labored hard, raised her children with quiet resolve, and assured herself that this was enough. But gradually the gap between her and Kody widened. It wasn't one action-packed instant. It was a gradual wearing down, like waves carving away at stone. Each time Kody skipped a milestone in their kids' lives, each time he pushed off her worries, each time she sensed his presence more as a duty than an option, another fragment of her eroded. The breaking point arrived with the pandemic. When family fissures turned into crevices, Kody tightened up, requiring his wives and children to obey his rules to the very last detail. If they were to catch a glimpse of him, he required strict boundaries. Rules Janelle's independent kids had a hard time accepting. Robyn and her children went along without protest, but Janelle's kids seethed under the oppression, and Janelle, between her husband and her children, had to make a choice. She chose her children. For Janelle, it wasn't an option. Her children were the center of her universe. She had raised them to be independent, strong, and honorable, and she wouldn't punish them for refusing to bend to rules they didn't believe in. But Kody saw it differently. He accused her of undermining him, of taking sides against him, of not being a loyal wife. The fights turned more bitter, the silences chillier. Janelle attempted, in her own reserved manner, to keep things afloat. She reminded herself that perhaps if she waited patiently enough, something would shift. Perhaps Kody would change his mind. Perhaps he would recall that their marriage was one of partnership, not merely power. But as months passed into weeks, she saw that the man she once admired had ceased to look at her as an equal. He ceased to visit her for counsel, ceased to regard her with warmth. What he said was sometimes an irritation, as if her freedom were a weakness rather than a virtue. The moment of revelation was the most mundane kind. On one evening, after yet another strained argument, Janelle sat in her living room by herself. The house was still, her children sleeping, the silence weighing on her shoulders. She reflected on the decades she had spent in this marriage, decades of compromise, sacrifice, and patience. And she posed herself one basic question: was she happy? The response was swift, merciless. No, she wasn't contented. She hadn't been for many years. She had been getting by, getting along, holding on, but not living. And as she considered her future, her years yet to come, she knew she couldn't waste them stuck in a marriage that no longer brought her love, respect, and happiness. When Janelle actually stood up to Kody, what she said was peaceful, but what she did was resolute. She said that she could no longer do it. She could no longer continue to put her own happiness on the line to maintain a family that was already on the verge of collapse. She said she needed some space, not only from the bickering, but also from him. Kody responded in shock. He had always perceived Janelle as the stable one, the wife who would never depart, the one who would hold on no matter how terrible things were. He fought, he begged, he blamed, but Janelle did not budge. For once she was the assertive peacemaker. For once she held her ground. Her breaking point wasn't as showy as Christine's. There were no moving vans, no on-camera tearful goodbyes. Janelle's separation was more subdued, more consistent, just like her. She just walked away, a line drawn that she would not cross again, and in doing so proved that even the most placid hearts have boundaries. The kids noticed the difference. They saw their mother's strength, her refusal to yield to pressure, her determination to pick herself after years of being ignored. They stood by her, proud of her strength, even as the family came apart further. To the audience, Janelle's breaking point shocked them not because she departed, but because up until that point, Janelle had been unshakable. If Janelle, the family's constant support system, could finally reach her breaking point, then that meant no one was safe from Kody's decisions. Her choice was another turning point. Christine had first walked away, and now Janelle was backing down too. The powerful plural marriage was disintegrating bit by bit, the vision coming apart, strand by strand, and Kody, the former confident leader, stood alone in the ruin, as the women who had constructed his world alongside him systematically walked away. But for Janelle, it wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. For the first time in years, she had the freedom to live life on her terms, without compromise, without excuses. She had the freedom to rediscover who she was outside of Kody, outside of the plural marriage, outside of the sacrifices that had defined her for so long. Her breaking point was not her weakness, it was her strength. And in leaving, Janelle demonstrated that the quiet ones often make the loudest statements. Meri was first. The first wife, first love, first woman, who ever believed in Kody's vision. Before the cameras, before the large homes, before the fame, there was only Meri and Kody, two naive dreamers who thought they could create something amazing together. It seemed possible for a time. They were in love, they were fearless, they were united. But first came with a price. She was the one who had to adapt each time there was a new wife. She was the one who had to share what was exclusively hers. She was the one who had to smile and accept that her love would never be hers again without sharing. She reminded herself she could do it. That was what plural marriage was. After all, sacrifice for the greater good. But over time, Meri's sacrifices left scars that no one else could see. She carried her pain in silence, often masking it with a tight smile. She watched as her bond with Kody grew thinner and thinner, stretched across years of jealousy, distance, and unspoken resentment. Where once there had been warmth, now there was formality. Where once there had been intimacy, now there was emptiness. The others knew it too. Meri had become a specter in her own marriage. She was present, but not present, and Kody, well, he had long since abandoned pretenses. The eventual collapse didn't arrive in one explosive battle. It arrived in slow, agonizing confessions. Kody started openly declaring that there was no chemistry, no romance, no marriage left between them. He informed Meri that he didn't envision a future for them as a couple. His declarations weren't merely blunt, they were definitive. For Meri, it was equivalent to hearing the doors of her marriage close, one lock clicking into place at a time. But even so, she did not leave. Not initially. Meri had always been a believer in commitment, in remaining even when it was painful, in honoring her vows regardless of the price. She convinced herself that perhaps loyalty was greater than love, that perhaps remaining, even in isolation, was still honorable. She held on to the belief that something could change, that the man who had once loved her might remember someday how it was. But hope has a tendency to become shackles. She suffered through years of emotional remoteness, years of being treated as an afterthought. She suffered the shame of public apathy, of seeing Kody invest his energy in other wives while ignoring her needs outright. She suffered until one day she understood suffering wasn't love, it was self-sabotage. The quiet breaking point was when Kody, on camera, confessed without hesitation that he didn't feel married to Meri anymore. His words weren't furious, they weren't dramatic, they were cold, detached, almost flippant, like he was explaining the weather, not the dissolution of decades of love and sacrifice. That was the last cut for Meri. There was no flame to fight for, no wedding to rescue. All that was left was the pride of choosing herself. Her farewell was not audible. She did not storm off, did not scream, did not make accusations. She just got up, raised her chin, and let go. Years of holding on to a man who had already pushed her away in all the ways that counted, she finally let go too. It was tearful. Meri had been a part of this family longer than anyone else. She had helped build its foundation, had given her heart to raising not only her own child, but to caring for the other wives and children as well. Going meant goodbye, not only to Kody, but to memories that stretched a lifetime. To birthdays and holidays, to late-night conversations with her sister wives, to the home that once rang with laughter. But leaving also brought freedom. For the first time in decades, Meri wasn't waiting around for Kody to see her. She wasn't sitting around waiting for kisses that didn't come, or begging for crumbs of attention. She wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a woman taking back her life. And as she bid him adieu, it wasn't only a goodbye to Kody, it was a goodbye to the part of her that had settled for less than she was worth. Viewers felt the weight of her departure. Many had watched Meri's pain for years, seen her cry in confessionals, seen her smile through rejection, seen her hold on even when hope was gone. To see her finally walk away was heartbreaking, but also deeply satisfying. She had given everything she had, and now she was giving herself permission to stop. Kody himself hardly winced. By this time, his love for Meri had been cut loose for so long that her departure hardly registered with him. And perhaps the most pitiful thing of all was that the man who had once loved her so much could not even manage to feel sorrow at her departure. But Meri didn't require his sorrow. She didn't require his remorse. She only required her own strength. And so she departed. Not in fireworks, not in tears cascading down her face, but in quiet dignity. A woman who had been the first to hold a dream true was now the last to release it. In walking away, Meri closed the book on a marriage that had been at the core of her life. But she also opened a new book, one that was hers alone. For the first time in years, her story was hers and hers alone. Her goodbye wasn't the end of her. It was the beginning. Robyn never thought she'd find herself here, alone alongside Kody as the only wife remaining in a marriage that had once been full of love, laughter, and chaos. When she first entered the Brown family, she arrived with hope, eagerness, and a faith that plural marriage would be all it promised. Sisterhood, harmony, and a community in which nobody ever felt alone. Initially, her coming was like a new beginning. She was young, vivacious, and Kody came alive with her in ways that didn't pass unnoticed. She was his partner in laughter, his best friend in dreams, the one who appeared to kindle his zest for life. But what started out as new beginnings for the family gradually evolved into the crack that drove it into divorce. The other wives noticed the change at once. Kody's fondness for Robyn wasn't merely apparent, it was all-consuming. He stood up for her fiercely, spent extra time in her house, and frequently defended her during arguments. He said he loved all his wives equally, but his behavior told a different story. And with each passing year, the disparity increased. Robyn didn't want to be the favorite, if only on the surface. She cried on television a lot, claiming she just wanted peace, that she never intended to hurt anyone. She pleaded with her sister wives to trust that she wasn't attempting to steal Kody away, that all she desired was to be included as a member of the family. But her tears, genuine or not, could not make the facts go away. Whether she liked it or not, she had become Kody's universe. And now, she was the only one left. Christine walked away first, not able to stay in a marriage without love. Janelle came next, tired of being pushed aside and opting instead to stand alone. And then Meri released, after holding on so long to a man who did not even think of himself as her husband anymore. Gradually the wives who had formed this family with Kody walked away from him, until only Robyn was left. To Robyn, this was hell. She never wanted to be the last wife standing. The ideal of sisterhood she had held so dear had become a nightmare of isolation. Rather than togetherness, there was emptiness. Rather than the sound of laughter filling four homes, there was silence. The big, boisterous family that had long characterized her life now seemed broken, scattered, beyond repair. Kody, bitter and resentful, clung to Robyn as his sole source of loyalty. He ranted at the wives who had abandoned him, lashing out at them for betrayal, disrespect, and selfishness. He funneled his sorrow and his anger into innumerable speeches on family, faith, and loyalty. And Robyn, out of love, or fear, or obligation, remained by his side, absorbing his sadness, his frustration, and his isolation. But being by his side cost her something. Robyn had dreamed of living with sister wives, who would be her friends, her confidants, co-parents. She envisioned her children raised with dozens of siblings and behind them a whole community of mothers. Instead, she was stuck in a marriage that seemed more monogamous than plural, without any sisters to share her life, no oneness, no harmony. Just she and Kody and the rubble of a dream. The stress of it all usually got to her. Fans watched her cry over and over, begging the family to reunite, pleading for the others not to turn their backs on her. She expressed a desire to have everyone be together again, to mend what was torn. But the truth was out, the family wasn't reunifying. Christine, Janelle, and Meri had written that page out of existence, and nothing short of tears would rewrite it. For Robyn, being the last wife was a bitter irony. She had once been blamed as the reason the family had broken down, the wedge that widened deep-seated cracks. And now, even though she possessed what many believed she desired, a husband to herself, she was unhappy. She hadn't desired a monogamous marriage, at least not this one. She hadn't desired to stand in the ruins of what once had been a family, but that was her life. The grand vision of poly love had reduced to one household. The bright family dynamic had dwindled into bitterness and deprivation. And Robyn, the woman who was meant to make up the set, found herself stuck in a life she didn't recognize. Kody relied on her more than ever before. She was now his sole partner, his sole confidant, his sole support. But the burden of his rage, his heartache, his constant rants about fidelity, it was suffocating. Robyn frequently gazed at the camera with puffy eyes, her voice cracking as she confessed that she felt alone, left behind and swamped. She was the last wife standing, indeed, but she was standing in shambles. For the audience, this was almost a kind of poetry. The family had been a testament to plural love, to numbers being strength, to the coming together in faith. Now there was left only a man and a woman, holding on to each other in the shadow of what had been. The dream had vanished. The unity had vanished. And while Kody and Robyn attempted to insist that they were still a family, all could see the reality. The Browns were no longer what they used to be. Robyn's tears said it all. She had won over Kody's complete attention, but lost everything else. The sisterhood, the unity, the vision of creating something greater than herself, and in her heart, even she knew, it wasn't worth it. She was the sole survivor of his wives. But she stood alone. When the Browns' story started, it was something unlike anything television had encountered. One man, 4 wives and a large family of kids, all living a lifestyle most of the world only speculated about. Sister Wives was more than a reality series. It was a phenomenon. It drew millions into a world behind closed doors, into a religion and way of life that many had only ever heard about in books or seen in secluded corners of history. For a time, the Browns were icons. To some, they embodied love multiplied, evidence that family could be unconventional and yet survive. To others, they were an outrage, a challenge to convention, a family openly defying what most people believed was normal. On either side, you couldn't turn away. The Browns weren't a TV family. They became a cultural topic of discussion. But as the years went on, that discussion evolved. Early on, Audiences watched to find out how it was done. How did one man juggle 4 wives? How did 4 wives juggle one husband? How did dozens of children grow up in peace living under one house? Or in this instance, under multiple ones? And in those early years, the Browns did their best to present a united front. They laughed together, shared birthdays, constructed new homes, and fantasized about a time when plural marriage could be accepted by society. But gradually, agonizingly, the cracks appeared. Individual by individual, the wives wondered if the dream was worth the price. Christine walked away first, refusing to exchange self-respect for loneliness. Janelle followed, unwilling to remain silent when happiness was slipping from her grasp. Meri, the first wife, the pillar finally released after all those years of holding out for a love that never would come back. And all that was left was Robyn, sobbing, alone, hanging on to Kody as the remnants of the dream dissolved away. The Browns' legacy, then, is not what they had once thought it would be. They had set out to demonstrate the fortitude of plural marriage, to illustrate that love could increase rather than fragment, that oneness could overcome jealousy. And yet, in the end, their legacy became something else. A cautionary tale. For what the world witnessed was not unity, it was division. Not unlimited love, but unlimited sacrifice. Not happiness, but sorrow. Kody, the man who once towered above as the head of this sprawling family, now stood amidst the wreckage of it. His wives lost, his children broken, his once shining dream tarnished. His legacy is complex. Some regard him as the villain, the man whose pride, obstinacy, and bias tore the family he professed to love apart. Others regard him as a man ensnared by his own dream, attempting to create something too heavy for any man to carry. And what about the wives? Their legacy burns brighter. Each one of them, in her own right, demonstrated courage in leaving. Christine demonstrated that you don't have to remain in a loveless marriage, no matter how long you've persisted. Janelle demonstrated that silent strength can become loud independence when cornered too hard. Meri demonstrated that even after decades of devotion, it's never too late to pick yourself. And Robyn showed that having what you believed you wanted may exact a price you never dreamt of. But maybe the Browns' greatest legacy is not the marriages, but the children. Scores of sons and daughters were raised in this household, saw their parents struggle, loved and fought with their brothers and sisters, and witnessed up close the peaks and valleys of plural marriage. Most of them have voiced disagreement, indicating they don't wish to live the same life their parents led. They've opted for independence, monogamy, and roots that diverge considerably from the one their father deemed holy. In their decisions, the Browns' tale extends out into a future not informed by obsolete customs, but by hard-earned lessons gleaned from heartbreak. And for audience members, the millions who watched this family year in and year out, the heritage is indelible. The Browns taught the world something more than television drama. They taught us a mirror. They revealed to us what occurs when love is stretched too thin, when pride becomes a block to connection, when sacrifice turns into self-destruction. They illustrated that even the most incredible of dreams can fall apart under the strain of reality. But they also demonstrated resilience. They demonstrated women who would not be defined by the decisions of their husband. They demonstrated children who paved their own path. They demonstrated that leaving isn't failure, it's strength. What is the Browns' legacy? It is a tale of beginnings and endings, of love and loss, of dreams constructed and dreams shattered. It is a reminder that no family, no matter how unusual, is immune to the universal conflicts of the human heart: jealousy, loneliness, hope, and the need to be loved. Kody Brown set out to show one man could keep 4 marriages, dozens of children, and one massive dream afloat. Ultimately, he demonstrated something else: that love cannot be ordered, loyalty cannot be coerced, and no dream can endure without respect to serve as its foundation. The Browns' tale is no longer theirs alone. Now it's anyone's who ever watched, anyone's who ever argued, anyone's who ever felt their heartache through the television. It will be remembered, not for what it intended to establish, but for the fact that it showed sometimes the life you create isn't the life you hold on to. And as the cameras dwindle, as the voices subside, there remains one truth. The Browns proved to the world that families can shatter, but individuals can emerge. That endings hurt, but they can also be beginnings. That even amidst the devastation of a dream, one can find strength. This is their legacy.